All right, and Theresa, I'm going to pass control back over to you. There you go. And you can go ahead and start sharing your screen when you're ready. Awesome. Okay, and it looks like the logging in has slowed down, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Brown with the Montana Pre-ETS Technical Assistance Center, and I'll be your moderator for today. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Montana Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center and is funded in whole or in part under a contract with the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statements shared in the presentation do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the department. All of our attendees are currently muted. This helps to cut down on the background noise. So if you want to ask the presenter a question or make a comment, please type your question or comment into the chat box. And when the presenter is ready to take questions, we'll go ahead and I'll read those out loud to her and she can respond so that everyone in the audience can hear. And we will most likely have a couple of question and answer periods during the session, and we'll definitely have a question and answer period at the end. For those of you who requested Montana Office of Public Instruction renewal units when you registered, those will be emailed to you after the webinar, and it can take up to a couple of weeks to get those sent out. Please note that you do have to have pre-registered and requested to receive the OPI credit, and unfortunately right now we're unable to issue other kinds of attendance documentation. Today's session is being audio taped for the Pre-ETS Resource Library, and the recording for the webinar will be posted to the Montana Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services YouTube channel. And we'll get that up usually within about a week or a week and a half. And I have posted the URL for that YouTube channel in the chat box. If you don't see the chat box on your screen, look to the upper right-hand side and you should see an orange box with a white arrow in it. If you click on that box, it should open a screen that includes the chat box, and in there you'll see the URL again for the archives of our webinars. When today's session ends, a survey link will pop up. It's just 8 questions, and we do ask that you please take the time to complete that survey. We look through all of the responses, and we use those to improve the sessions that we offer, and also to plan on topics that we will address in future webinars. So again, please take the time to complete that short survey. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's speaker. We're very lucky to have with us Theresa Baldry. Theresa is a parent of 6 children, including a son with a disability. Her belief that knowledge is power has directed her areas of employment in the disability field. She has worked for PLUC, Parents Let's Unite for Kids, since 2001, and is a member of the leadership team. Technology has played a key role in her son's life, and as his primary support for the last 20 years, she has needed to stay in front of what he has wanted that technology to do. She began working for Montech in October 2012 to share what they have learned over the years. Currently, she has moved to the Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center, still with the Rural Institute, as a project coordinator. As a parent, she serves on the Disability Rights of Montana Board of Directors. She volunteers with Special Olympics on projects of interest. Theresa has been a member of the Rural Institute Consumer Advisory Council since 2010 and has presented at numerous conferences and webinars as a council member. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Theresa. Thanks so much for presenting for us today.
Thank you, Kim, for the introduction, and I hope everyone is having as lovely a morning as I am. It is absolutely blue skies and beautiful, so it might be early afternoon for some of you, I understand, but I hope you're having a beautiful day as I am, and thank you for taking time in July to spend time learning about the parent and the family involvement in this process of transition and what they bring to the table when we start talking about employment. So I'm going to move to my next slide. There we go. This is 2 pictures of my son Isaac and I. As you can tell, there's a little bit of age change within those pictures. I got involved with PLUC, Parents Let's Unite for Kids, which is Montana's PTI back when Isaac was only 2, because there was information and knowledge that I needed and didn't have. And the Parent Training and Information Center is where I was able to go and acquire that information. And back then, what we needed to know more about was assistive technology. We knew that my son Isaac, pictured here, had enormous abilities, but because of his physical limitations, including being nonverbal, it was difficult for us to tap into that and for him to be able to get it out. And one of the things that we have learned over the years is that assistive technology was critical and a primary component for his daily life in getting out into the world and for us to get in. So I have been very fortunate that, having worked for Pluck since 2001 and being involved with Pluck since he was only 2, I have that steady flow of information. So that the Parent Training Information Center provided a continual connection for me to be able to access information, because, as Kim mentioned before, knowledge is power to me, and I quickly learned what I knew could significantly make a difference for my child. So that's why I started working for Pluck, is I really felt that other parents needed a way to get to information. But parents are often really so busy with their regular lives and the care of a special needs child, the last thing they really have is time. And acquiring information usually takes time. So I wanted to be able to be a support to families. We have other pockets of support throughout the state of Montana. Pluck happens to be statewide and available to all parents. There are a variety of parent groups in the state of Montana. Bozeman has a special education PTA and call themselves SEPTA. Butte has a group called Circle of Friends. Some of the medical facilities have parent partners, but for where I am, which is a very small rural community, there often isn't something for parents. And when we start talking about rural, which can be a lot of the state of Montana, there's a lot more isolation. So one of the things we need to look at, both as a parent and as a professional, is how do we help parents to access that information in a quick manner, but getting them what they need to know to move forward. Just yesterday, I was on a webinar, and I really liked this concept that they were presenting about how you connect people. They referred to it as a soft and a hard connection, being that a hard connection meant you just gave information, and when it was a soft connection, you took the time to ensure that what you were offering was still available, and that there was a person you spoke to pass the person who needed the information off to, so that you initiated and started some of that connection to provide a more efficient, more time-effective way of getting information. So I'm going to move on to my next slide. Most of the goals, or really the goal of what I wanted to talk about, is I wanted from this presentation for parents to be able to somewhat self-assess where they were at, what information they may want to learn or gain, and what information they may need to be able to share when working with professionals. I also hope to empower parents to participate and to be a part of the process. I know time is that big factor, but there is no one more important and more impacting than a family on the success of an individual with a disability. And we're going to talk a little later on how there's research that shows that. For professionals, I really had a couple pieces I was hoping they also would gain. One is understanding of what else might be impacting your professional success with a family, and then hopefully from that giving you ideas on how you could collaborate more effectively with families. So to start with, we all have to start in the same place, both as professionals and parents. We all have to believe that parents improve the outcomes in the transition process. We all have to buy into and believe that family participation is going to impact success. Sometimes parents don't believe this. They believe that professionals have all the information and that they know what they're doing and that they're going to take care of it and that they don't belong in the process. And sometimes we tell parents that. And sometimes professionals don't believe that parents belong in the process, that they're disengaged or they don't want to be a part of it, or I'm not sure how to access this parent. And so it can happen in both ways, that we're not starting in the same place. So one of the pieces I want to say is we all need to start in the same place, that the participation of the family is going to impact the success of the youth, which is what all of our goal is. So what does that research tell us? And I was specific in pulling out some really current research because there's been research conducted on this for over 40 years. We've been looking at how family participation impacts education, but it also impacts anything that we're doing when we're working with families and youth. So this first is a study that families play a key role in ensuring youth develop self-determination behaviors, which is closely tied to successful education and career outcomes for young people with disabilities. Out of that same study, when families of youth with disabilities are given personalized supports, and we'll talk a little bit about that, they're better able to identify educational and other services that are useful in assisting youth to meet goals of the future. And then the Harvard Family Research has been doing a lot of research around families, and I always appreciate their work. And one of the statements they have that I think is so true is parents play a key role in their child's cognitive, social, and emotional development from birth through adolescence and beyond. And I think all of that information is really important as to what we're going to be talking about today. This slide is actually from the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center, and they looked at what they called predictors, outcomes, and how those predictors and outcomes affected three areas: education, employment, and independent living. And you'll see some predictors crossed into one or two, but there's actually a few that managed to impact education, employment, and independent living. One of those being inclusion in general education classes. Another one that we work with at the Technical Assistance Center is that paid employment, that work experience, impacting all pieces. Another one of those that impacts all pieces, and part of what this webinar is about, is parental expectations. That if parents have the vision, if parents have the goal and the expectation for the child, it has the potential and the research to impact education, employment, and independent living. So if families aren't there, one of the pieces that we're going to need to talk about is how do we help families get there. And then the last piece was that their ability to be in providing self-care and independent living. So this was, to me, a really nice slide in that it captured all of those predictors, and it demonstrates that research, that parental involvement is an evidence-based predictor on post-school success in employment. And so to me, some of this is almost like another side of that coin, is another reason or another piece to why it's so important to involve families and parents is they may see different people than professionals see, because we often see different people, skills, strengths, and needs when individuals are interacting with different people or in different environments. Families possess that valuable information about how they have seen through the history of this child, the historical life of this individual, what environments and what people impacted this youth? What about this person made this successful? What about this environment made this successful for their child in the everyday life of families? They also have those interests and those strengths, and as well as the needs of what that young person has experienced throughout their life. Because sometimes some of the things that we see are this behavior or this skill used to be there and isn't presently. So what could have impacted that? This holds true for all parents, not just parents of children with disabilities. My mom is a teacher, and when she would go to parent-teacher conferences, one of the needs or concerns they would almost always immediately hit her with was that her daughter, Theresa, was far too quiet, far too shy, couldn't speak up. And she would correct them and say, no, I'm Theresa Hensley's mom. You must have the wrong child. Because the child she knew, she wasn't sure was going to make it to 18 because she was so willing to try everything and do everything, and she couldn't get me to be quiet for anything. So that environment can so significantly impact. She was a teacher. She had expectations for what I was going to do in school, and she made it very clear to me. I was meeting her expectation for school. She just didn't know who that person was. One of the processes that we are sharing information on, and I hope people begin to access more information on, is discovery. And Isaac and I were extremely fortunate that Kim Brown and Ellen Condon from the Rural Institute provided us an opportunity to go through the discovery process so that they helped learn about my son in multiple environments and environments of strength, and took in what was meaningful to our family and where we saw him successful. That was extremely beneficial for us in our transition planning, and now is having a resurgence. It's coming back, and I hope people get the opportunity to participate and learn about discovery, because it really does take in all of those people and all of those places. Because unless we tap into the families who have been the case manager for their child, we're not gathering up a way of pulling all that historical information. We're not capturing it for beneficial youth success. We're not looking at how could that impact their education, their employment, their independent living. And during that discovery, it even helped us with what were some of the things maybe we hadn't been working on that were going to be important for his success that we needed to take a look at. So I'm going to jump all the way ahead to transition, and I apologize that I'm even going to take a sip here, provided I can grab my water bottle. So parents and families, both by professionals and themselves, sometimes are perceived as not belonging when we are trying to establish autonomy for that young person. And studies have shown that although that desire for autonomy and independence is important, it may just be an indicator for a preference for the way we involve, but it shouldn't be perceived as a barrier to parental involvement. So if the young person is trying to stand on their own, and we want them to, personally we worked on this from the beginning, and it is one of my son's greatest assets. But there's a place there to support their success, not overrun, not overrule, but support their success. Families continue to want to support their young person's success, but are often unaware, what should that look like? How do I do that? How do I support them? And what are some tools? We've got some nice presentations that we have done in the past on alternatives to guardianship. that you might want to check into if that's something that you're concerned about. We also have to be aware of, the parents know what those needs may be, and they may be using strategies already to help with self-determination in that role of the adult. If they haven't, we may need to be providing them an opportunity for education and information on how could they support this and what could it look like. Because it's not like you get a book when you get a child with a disability that has all this information. It's acquired as you have access to information. The last piece that I thought was really important, and unfortunately, because as Kim mentioned, I'm a parent of 6, so I have a significant span of ages of my children. With 3, what I would consider current young adults, 2 in college, transition just takes longer now than it used to. I think part of that is because they're expecting more parental involvement. Schools seem to be somewhat more willing to have that parental involvement, and families are providing a lot of that financial and emotional support for individuals with and without disabilities after graduation, so after that exit of school. We've seen a lot of change in what we consider transition. And I think this comes in a couple different areas. We've seen it that in the past, outcomes were usually whether or not the service was provided, to a degree, a checkbox. Was it given? Was it not given? Now, because of federal legislative changes, we're really looking at, in all programs, what were the results of what you provided? What was the customer satisfaction and impact of what you provided? The age of transition for a while, and this is going to date me, but it was back at 14. Then it shifted up to 16. And now it may, for some things we're looking back as early as 14 again. So is what I want parents to be able to take away is it's never too early to start planning for transition. There is, just like parents need additional information, additional tools, additional skill sets for this child with a disability, the child is going to need additional information, additional tools, and additional skill sets for their success as an adult. So it is never too early to start working on transition. And I set this title up on purpose because I think sometimes we just get stuck on where the barriers are. And I'm hoping as we identify some of those barriers, we look at some of the considerations as to why that happens. And I'm hoping I also am able to assist you in generating some ideas around that. So I want to start with, how do we usually get families involved? When we look at transition, we tend to look at family participation at this point in the education environment has decreased. Families participated more in kindergarten and first grade and were more a part of their school possibly in the younger years. As students increased in age within the school environment, the family expectation of participation probably went down. The school didn't want as much family participation. And so when we come at this with transition and we're wanting families to be highly engaged, you've changed the rules. You changed the expectation as professionals of what you want of this family who's been being told they need to be weaned away, that their participation needs to decrease. Wandry did a survey in 2008 of pre-service teachers on their perceptions of barriers and facilitators to evidence transition practices that they encountered in the field and teaching experiences. One finding, relevant finding, indicated that family involvement was regarded as the most critical conduit to effective transition planning, and correspondingly, that lack of such involvement was a prime barrier to effective transition planning. So I think that's something for us to think about. Not only is it an indicator in the success, but when it's not there, it's a significant barrier. So again, that brings us back to how do we assist families where they're at, and with the goal being their success for the success of the young person. The caution of this finding is that practitioners, professionals, may blame parents for ineffective transitions. But we really need to be willing to take a look at how do all the members of the group impact that parent participation. That it's not a blame game. It's not a, well, because you didn't, this isn't successful. It's how do we have shared responsibility in developing this partnership. We all have the same outcome. We all believe that transition and family support is important. So how do we come to the table together to share the responsibility and make sure that parents know they're expected to participate, but that we believe they're an integral part of the transition team. Sometimes as professionals, we can see families as lacking in skills. That as professionals, we need to raise their skills in order for them to be able to participate, or that we need to act upon them in order for them to be a valuable partner in this. And when we feel that way about a parent, or a parent is receiving that kind of a treatment from us, how does that affect the partnership? Is that respect there? Is the value of all people there? It can have a significant impact on the effectiveness of the team. So I think it's something we need to be aware of when we're sharing information. Are we doing it in a way that we feel that the parents are lacking and therefore we need to act upon it, or is it that we're learning together? And that goes back to meeting the families where they're at in a non-judgmental manner, and also within that being aware of what their goals are within the transition process. We as professionals may have goals that we feel are the most important and need to be acted upon, and we may provide information on it. But unless we allow families to set the goals and set the priorities, they may not have buy-in. How do we feel when people tell us what the plan will be? Do we become resistant? Do we feel we're part of that plan? There's a couple projects out there. The Promise Grants in our state are Aspire, and I'm really excited that they're really looking at the family holistically, and I think it's some of the first work that we're doing as professionals within that. Another one in the mental health that has existed for a while that I appreciate taking that approach is what's called wraparound. And so the whole family is considered and what their needs are and where they want to go with this, so that they build a trust to work together. So I just love this picture because sometimes this is how we can view parents in the transition process. And as parents, sometimes it may be that this is just where we're at. We can quickly become overwhelmed, and putting your head in the sand or ignoring it may just feel like a better plan. So here's where I would like professionals to even maybe take a step back and think about a time when you personally felt overwhelmed in a situation. Did that feeling of being overwhelmed affect you physically? Did it have an effect on you emotionally? did it block your availability to receive information because of how the environment was affecting you, how the situation was affecting you? Families of youth with disabilities have already, for a significant period of time, been involved in multiple systems. At the very minimum, they've been dealing with the medical system and the educational system. It may be that the families feel it's just easier to maintain the status quo and resist programming changes, because those changes or that sharing of information is going to create vulnerability both for the family and the child. And that vulnerability so goes to trust that if that hasn't been established, just how often as a parent are you willing to make yourself or your child vulnerable to how outsiders will impact their life? And by outsiders, I do mean professionals. If you're not an integrated, integral part of their network, their community, then you feel like an outsider. How do parents end up feeling that, that they're overwhelmed? Usually when we start talking about transition, we're letting parents know all of the things that are going to change. We want to make sure that they're getting the information. So we're giving it to them all at once. Not necessarily in a solution sense, but here's all the things that are going to need to be done. And that can lead to feeling overwhelmed. The other piece of that is when you start talking about all of what needs to be done, sometimes there's conversation of what all is going to disappear. What supports that have been there for years will no longer be that person, that agency, that system that we've worked through and understand how to use, or at least are familiar with. So now we're saying that because they're becoming a young adult or will be an adult, so many of those supports and systems that are in place are going to change. And you just need to do it. You just need to do it. It's what needs to be done. Just do it. So we really need to look at building a new support structure that requires sorting through the maze of options while also learning about a variety of new laws, systems, and benefits and requirements. And at the same time, the young people that are going through this are trying to promote their independence and may even be dealing with physical and emotional changes that are being brought up due to adolescence, just like their typically developing counterparts. Their feelings about the future might be contradictory or complex. They might feel that they want their parents involved, but it's their job to also push them away. Their parents aren't sure whether they belong in this world of helping the child, or if they're supposed to step back and let the child move into the world on their own. Families often don't even know what questions they're supposed to ask. So if you don't know the questions to ask, how can you get to the information you need? One of the other things that can happen for families, and this is part of that understanding, is that for families, when we're talking about change, it may be that they've experienced what I call good years and bad years. They've had times where things got worked out and are going along okay, but they know as soon as they start to question things, or if one thing needs to be changed, it can be a domino effect that affects so many other pieces, and you don't know when that change is going to stop, when the good and the settled and we have a routine is going to come back. For some families, it could be that due to this advocating for their child, they're just wore out. They don't have the energy to think about, will this be another battle? will I have the stamina to ask all of the questions? And again, do I even know those questions to ask? I talked a little bit about this, but for some families, it's a safety and security issue. It goes back to that, what will you do with the information that I give you? If I create a vulnerability and I share personal information with you, what are you going to do with that information? That goes back to that trust as a factor in the relationship. And does it exist so that I'm willing as a parent to make myself and my child vulnerable? That when I share this information, you're going to use it to help us? Or will it be that you simply, as a professional, dismiss it? Another challenge might be the way that we collect transition information from families. We all want it on paper so that we can access that information. But a lot of times, we're just looking at fill this in and give us the information. And that can also lead to that overwhelming feeling of all of the things you maybe as a parent hadn't thought about. Or do I even understand your question? In the tool that you gave me, did you spend time, did we talk about it, or was it something that was sent home so in the privacy of my own home I could fill it out? Does that create that isolation? So how can we do this more as a partnership? The other piece I want you to think about, and it's actually my first bullet on this, is just like with that student or that young person that we're working with, there's not just one way that works for everybody. We're looking at what are the individual skills, what are the individual strengths, what are the individual needs. The exact same holds true for families. Yet we, in our current method of gathering information, approach families usually all in the same way. We may have a transition survey that we provide to families, or we have 2 or 3 we choose between. But at no point are we taking an individualized approach at getting information from families. And it may not be that we can achieve getting all the information we need at once. It may need to be a process as they're willing to share layers of their lives. It may be that where they want to start and where they feel they could be successful starting is something we need to consider. Do they have the information for that individual piece to be able to move forward? So we're looking at how can we take steps so that as a team we can be successful with a component of transition. Because when we're successful together, we can build the trust of a collaboration. We also have to understand that we may have to progress at their pace. Families can have so many pieces that impact them, and we'll talk a little about those as we move on, but there can be so many pieces that impact their availability for information that we have to move at their pace. Again, being the most important piece being that their participation impacts success. So we have to move at what they're ready to handle. And it has to be things that are relevant to them and matter to all of the parties, so we're a team. So in that, we need to really look at how do we start to develop a plan, develop a roadmap to what needs to be done and what needs to be considered. And it may not be, again, all of it. It's when parents are starting to put up a wall, then we're going to stop. And what within this would we feel comfortable addressing? When we start to work on this plan, there's going to be things that come up that change, or that because we learned about this, now it impacts that. That's okay. That happens in planning. It's, again, working it out and believing that we're going to start somewhere and work forward together. The non-judgmental piece comes in here so quickly for professionals. If a family feels that we're not working together and that there's judgment involved, we can quickly affect that trust factor. So are we creating a safe place where families can share that the information that they provide is in a trusted environment, that we're willing to work with them, and that when they share that private information and make themselves vulnerable, we can move past our own judgments. That in our ability to be professional, we don't have to decide whether we agree with it or not. It's where that family is. For me, personally, this is probably one of my least favorite slides. And it may be that goes back to it's not something families openly want to talk about. But for all families who have a child with a disability, at some point they have had to deal with some level of grief. Grief is a cycle. It has, sometimes it's referred to as having distinct states. That's out of a Moses information in 1987, I apologize. For parents of children with this special health care needs, grief rarely happens in a predictable, linear fashion. Oftentimes, that sense of loss is an ongoing process, and it's very common for parents to re-experience these various feelings of grief at many points throughout a child's development. On a personal level, Isaac and I both experienced grief at a time we didn't expect it. He was outside playing with a group of kids that he'd played with often and was used to being a part of their activity. Because they were now school age and the park was not far from where we lived, they all took off to the park so they'd have a bigger area to play. And he had to come to me for transportation to the park. That grief for he and I of not being able to just take off and play was overwhelming that day. It took the rest of the day from us. Although we moved through it in a day, it was impacting and remained a piece. Grief often can happen also when things are stressful, when we're in a stressful part of an individual's life. Transition is highly stressful. That's not a shock. So it's highly possible for a family that they may experience pieces of grief just within trying to deal with transition. Maybe for a family, unfortunately, it might be the first time they've experienced it. So if a family is dealing with grief, how are we supporting them in that? If it's staying and being prolonged, how are we providing them the counseling support that they may need? But it's one of the pieces that can be so impacting and can be a barrier for the family, which then becomes a barrier for the professionals. This, of course, is an area that's going to be really difficult to talk about. It's very vulnerable, very private. Because of work that I do or choose to do, I have to be willing to make myself vulnerable to share that personal story. The parent may have just adjusted to the expectations for their child within their home, and because of new environments have to deal with those feelings of denial or fear or depression because of a new challenge that's presented to them. We have to help parents understand that all of these feelings or states of grief serve a purpose, and that it's okay to experience them. Some parents will express this in the form of anger, and every parent's different. Grief is an individual, just like it's going to seem like we keep coming back to that process. There's not a right way and a wrong way for a parent or a family to experience grief, or for a young person. It's not right or wrong. It's how they individually are experiencing it. Parents need to have the space to experience it and express what's important to them, especially those feelings. They have to be willing and able to let go of hopes and dreams that they originally had. And it's a complicated and complex process. But in that willingness to let go of what we had held in the past for a vision allows us to more fully connect with what is right in front of us, and can help us to develop and create new hopes, new expectations, and new dreams for ourselves and for our families. So that would be the goal, the place we want to move to, is, are we seeing families able to transition to having new hopes, new visions, and new dreams? If not, it may be that they are struggling and stuck in grief. Another piece that can highly impact professionals is past people in these families' lives. Many, many families have met that one doctor or that one professional that has set incredibly low expectations. The statements of, your child will never, your child can never. That is a devastating piece of information, and sometimes a wrong piece of information for a parent to hear. Those people that provide that information impact families forever. For some people, that's a direct challenge. What do you mean they never will? There's a way around this. For some people, if a professional tells you that, they know what's best, and it's difficult to move past what that expectation was that they set. Family members can also do this and impact families. So we have to realize that generationally, what was expected of individuals with disabilities has significantly changed for the better. Fantastic. But even within my own family, older members of the family don't necessarily understand where we have chosen to go. They may appreciate and see the impact and change, but that wasn't the way things were done. And so sometimes that, depending on the family structures, that can be very impacting. Culture can play a piece in that. And the reason I bring up the medical model is, whether we're talking about a medical report or a school education report, still today, we often talk about what's wrong. We start from the premise of things are broken, or don't function the way they should, or are below expectation, instead of looking at it from, this is where the individual is, and these are their skills and strengths, and this is the way forward. We tend to start with what's not normal, what's broken, what's the deficit. Again, realize that families have heard these things over and over for years and years. So in transition planning, when we're trying to flip this and ask them their expectations, just like we can get a blank look from a 14-year-old, a family may feel the same way. This is another study I just wanted, to kind of wrap up this environmental and emotional factors with that. There are all kinds of pieces that are impacting the families that professionals are working with. Although I'm not saying I want you to pry into their lives the minute they walk in the door, I want you to know that there may have been an extensive amount of information that they've had to deal with over the last day, hour, week, that when they walked in your door, if they could have canceled the appointment, they would have. And are we as professionals willing to meet them where they're at that day and know that there will need to maybe be another opportunity? Maybe the opportunity that's presented on that day when they're coming to us overwhelmed or unavailable for one more piece of information is that we are a trusted component to their team and that we believe working together will impact the outcome of the youth we all are working for. Sorry, catching up with my slides here. This is I just am so excited about this project. I was kindly invited to a training that was provided back in April. And this is called Big Picture Planning. And a large school district in the state of Montana had a professional who had taught at MSU Billings come in and is providing them training on shifting how the district as a whole is looking at transition. It was so wonderful to watch these professionals and this presenter talk about how can we get to families sooner? How can we start building this relationship and start acquiring this information and start vision planning, dream planning early when we're meeting with families. At that April training, and they are still pursuing ongoing training in this process, they were really looking at, could we start this as soon as the child is coming into our district? Can we make sure that we're starting to find a way to map together what strengths are, what concerns are, and what's our common vision, what's the family's vision for this child, to help them start thinking about a vision, to help them start thinking about areas of concern or areas of need. I'm really excited about this project, and I'm really hoping it will move forward. So as I had told Kim, this is a place that I will stop for a few questions because unfortunately there's a lot I still want to cover, and I've been into this an hour on us already.
Right. Theresa, a couple of questions have come in. Where can I get copies of the survey in the PowerPoint? And this question came in when you were on slide number 12 specifically.
There are all kinds of surveys out there that are one-pagers or six-pagers on transition planning. I just happened to capture that one because I wanted people to be aware that there are tools out there. I'm not saying that I think, and in fact I'm telling you right now, I don't think a paper tool is the best way to gather information from a family. It might be that within a process we are looking at a way that we're recording that information, but I'm really wanting us to think about whether, how effective sending a paper tool home with a student for a family to fill out alone is.
Okay, great, thank you. And then there were some other comments about Social Security work incentives and past plans, but I think those are beyond the scope of today's webinar, so I'll just send folks out, and actually I already posted in the chat box the link to the Transition and Employment Project's webinar archives. And we have a number of webinars that have dealt with Social Security work incentives and past plans specifically in the past. So if you're interested in more information on those topics or in the Alternatives to Guardianship webinar that Theresa mentioned, you can find those on the Transition and Employment Project's training archives page. And again, I've put that link in the chat box. Just one other quick comment I forgot to mention at the start of today's webinar, that the slides that Theresa is going through that she's developed for today are available in the handouts section on your screen. So if you don't see that in front of you, again, look for the orange arrow, or the white arrow inside the orange box, excuse me, toward the upper right-hand area of your screen. If you click on that, it should open a dialog box, and there should be somewhere in there a button that says Handouts. That's where the PowerPoint and a PDF version of the PowerPoint for today are posted if you're interested in downloading or copying or printing any of the slides. And those are all the questions for now. Theresa, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to try and move a little more quickly because I have a lot of information I want to share with you on employment and the role and opportunity that I feel families bring to the table as part of transition planning and as part of what they're already doing that could be a component to employment. So families play an important but often underutilized role in helping young people with disabilities explore careers, build work skills, and be successful in employment. Families can be a resource to assist professionals in accessing their personal networks. Who do they know and how could they support finding job opportunities and building those work readiness skills right at home? Families don't often see the initial connection between work skills and the everyday activities at home. So sometimes it's just helping them make those connections or sharing the opportunity for them to see how what they're already doing could impact work skills. Families may think professionals don't need their help. This is the time for them to step aside. So we need to make sure that they understand and have invited them and asked them to be a partner in the process. So I'm going to share a short video here, so give me a minute while I pull it up, and hopefully this all goes well, Kim. Children ages 4 to 8 draw pictures as they answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? They are sitting at a desk as their original drawings are shown in the background.
I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I want to be an artist and a doctor once I grow up. I want to be a ballerina, a pirate. I want to be a basketball player. I got to be a policeman. The police officer gets the bad guy. I want to be a teacher when I grow up. I'm going to be a fireman. I am going to be a ballerina when I grow up. When I grow up, I'm going to be a singer because I love to sing, and I've been singing since I was like 4. I want to be a teacher when I grow up. I want to be a marine biologist. I want to be a hockey player when I grow up. Yes, I want to be a video game designer. I want a hockey video game too. When I grow up, I want to be a baseball player or an ice cream man. Cool, huh? I keep telling my mom when I grow up I want to be a dog. I played baseball, and my game's off. I can be an ice cream man at the baseball game, so I can also be watching baseball. My favorite thing about hockey is when we get checked in the boards. I want to be when I grow up as a singer. Well, I'm going to be in a hip-hop show. When you grow up, I'm going to be a drawer. I want to be a sports coach when I grow up. It does not matter which sport. I also want to be a bumblebee, and I'm going to be purple. And I'm going to go outside and go on a swing, and I'm going to say to all my friends. To have a job, it's like to make money and help all your family and stuff. Make money and help other people. Like you have to buy food for your family and support your family. Helping our community grow. Stuff that will help us keep living, like house, everyone has a job, it'll make them feel proud. So I can live a good life. I feel happy when my mom asks me what I want to be when I grow up. I think it's important for kids to believe in their dreams. Their parents stay and stand with other people. I think it shows that you want to be. It feels good to have a dream because it might come true. Don't make me be happy if I could be an astronaut. If they don't have the dreams, then they don't really have a life. It would be like just boring old regular, just sitting on the couch and watching TV. Don't never give up on your dream. Just try as hard as you can, and then one day you can make it. Every kid should have a dream. They should work hard and be happy when they work for their dream. Thanks to Spin Children's Services, Team Dr. E. Team Michelle Dwyer, Wake Marshall Elementary.
Sorry, trying to get our PowerPoint back up to where we were at. I just love that video. I think the kids say it so well in that how are we helping children have dreams and how are we helping parents to have that expectation and to have that dream. To me, the path forward started at home. How did we as parents respond to the child's dream? And are we giving children with disabilities that same opportunity to dream? Hopefully all is going to come back up here. Okay, Kim, hopefully everything's coming along. So families can help youth create goals for themselves. Parents can start to begin to instill that expectation that their child will be employed as an adult, that they will be an active member of the community. Building work skills at home, to me, starts with that work readiness, workplace skills. So within the home, there's an opportunity to learn and practice these skills, and I kind of have broken it down into 4 areas: responsibility, problem solving, interacting with others, and taking direction. Within problem solving, families have to do this all the time. Families can give individuals that opportunity to provide input in ordinary situations and solve that family challenge, rather than it just being what does the parent give us direction, but how as a family unit can we problem solve for a solution to accommodating a guest. Maybe Uncle Bill is coming. What's the solution for how we can accommodate Uncle Bill? What are things we need to consider? If we're going to go on a vacation, are we planning that as a family? What are we looking at and considering in recreation? So as that family, we have an opportunity to work as a team. We can plan for that goal together, and we can discuss the barriers together. Another way that we can do this is volunteering together. We can take, as a family, opportunities to go into environments and volunteer together, so the young person has that opportunity to experience with safe people what were some of the barriers they encountered, what were some of their skills and strengths, so that it's a together process, and we can look at problem solving being a part of what families already do. Interactions with others, and sometimes these are referred to as soft skills, and I know families have to deal with this. Families have to look at how does everyone interact. What's appropriate clothes for when We go to church. What do we wear when we go to the wedding? Was it the same thing we wore when we went camping last week? So there's that opportunity to teach about proper attire in what environment. Can we take advantage of those naturally occurring occasions and take them as teachable moments within the family? Families are already doing this. They just may not even realize that it's a work readiness skill. Are we helping them connect what they're already doing to work? Same with expected behaviors. What we discuss at home may not be restaurant talk, or what we share with a group of friends might not be the same thing we shared with grandma. So it's helping them that what is shared, what is discussed can be different based on environment, based on people, and most often for families, although they may want assistance and support in the area of hygiene, it is often taught at home. What is that expectation? How do we support that and address that at home? Taking work direction is often a barrier or why employment could cease. So we need to start working on that, and those of you who experience teenagers can buy into this. We have to start working on that taking work direction far before they're teenagers and starting to assert their independence. Families can share how they get things done and the importance of the relationship in completing those goals together. For little kids, this can be as simple as follow the leader, or having an activity that they provide the direction in, and based on what people did from what they were told, how did that affect things? Now it's your turn to be the receiver of information, to follow the directions given. Were you able to follow those directions? Were the directions wrong? Was there not enough information? There's so many great opportunities for this to be a play activity, a building skill activity. We accomplish this together because we all follow directions together. Again, families might not see the importance of this as taking work direction, but for individuals with disabilities, this can have a significant impact on their success in employment. How do they respond when given direction? So within job exploration counseling, families provide youth with quality self-exploration opportunities. They provide activities outside the school day, and often in areas that youth are passionate about. They probably support families or youth being involved in clubs, things that are of interest. If they're going on vacation and they know their child is into sharks, they might have arranged to go to a museum or an aquarium that specialized in sharks, that gave that information. So there's opportunities all the time that families are tapping into based on the interests of that youth. But are we also helping families know that they could talk to individuals that work there and learn more about the jobs there? It's making sure that families have the information and can connect to what could they be doing in addition. So asking the young person, what are the jobs that are here? What about that job would be important to you? What about that job would not be important to you or you would really dislike? Families can communicate that employment is the expectation. That is so critical for the success of employment, that youth understand that that's the expectation of the family. They can learn about the work of family members and friends. Families can help connect to Uncle Bill's work, or to my friend down the street also does that, and could maybe set up a time for you to visit them at work or see more about their job, or just spend time talking with them. Families can naturally provide that opportunity. For younger children, we can even look at taking them on outings and what are the jobs that we're seeing when we are out. There's the clerk at the store. There's the person who's stocking shelves. There's all kinds of naturally built-in opportunities for job exploration counseling. Work-based learning. Again, goes back to cultivating those interests and connecting those interests with work. Families can encourage multiple work experiences, that there's not just one job shadow or one job we look at, but that there's that opportunity to experience multiple jobs because we learn from all of those opportunities. Families can help with connecting to those multiple opportunities. They can use their networks. They might even be the ones that help set up that part-time, first-time job. They can assist in exploring volunteer opportunities. Families often are the ones that are providing the transportation to that job shadow or to that visit. So making sure that if families are providing that, we're valuing that and providing that support to them of how they're contributing. They can share key pieces that happened in their own lives and help shape where they are in their career. What was it that changed in their career path? What did they do? What did my sister do, my brother do? So families have that natural environment to share about the experiences with work. Counseling and opportunities for enrollment in post-secondary education. This first one is so important. Parental expectation was an evidence-based predictor on post-school success in education and employment. Within that education piece, if the parental expectation is not that they will go to college or on to a training program, it's just not going to be as successful. With the parents being a part of that and setting that expectation, it creates such a higher level of opportunity. So youth with disabilities in post-secondary settings have better outcomes when their families are engaged in ongoing planning for communication and collaboration in that post-secondary environment. And that's not just their academics. That's the students' health, well-being, and those social connections that make that new environment a community. Fortunately, in the state of Montana, we have some great opportunities to look at post-secondary education activities. There's Moving On at the University of Montana, and starting next year will also be available at MSU Billings. There's an opportunity to go and check out a college as a family as part of what you do when you're on vacation or traveling. Families can provide that assistance in filling out applications and financial aid opportunities. One of the college opportunities that we took advantage of was the Montana Youth Leadership Forum, which is based on a college campus. So you got a feel for what it was like to live on campus. So how are we looking at and supporting families doing this and valuing families for doing this, helping them know that what they do matters? Self-advocacy often starts at home. And it's one of the pieces that we need to understand is that it's a skill and that it needs to be built. It's not something that we can assume that's there. So we need to make sure that we're providing opportunities to build self-advocacy, to encourage self-determination. That could be part of an IEP goal. That could be how is the youth involved in their IEP process or in any process where they're working with professionals. How are they an active, participating component of the team? What do they bring to the team? At home, how do we value their self-advocacy? How do we listen to what they're telling us and provide that, take that as input for something that may need change. Now, I do, as a parent, realize we can't change everything based on what they're telling us. But again, for my son, his ability to tell me what works and what doesn't work is one of his greatest skills, especially around the area of assistive technology. So we also have to help youth identify what supports and accommodations help them be successful. That could come up in that volunteer experience. They have to be able to not only identify those, but be able to tell someone, whether it's explaining that with pictures or verbalizing it or sharing a list. But we have to set that expectation that they are able to share what they need for success. And lastly on here I have the supported decision making, and that's tools to assist youth learning to be adults. There will be sessions at the Montana Transition Conference happening this November in Helena on self-determination, supported decision making. There's information on the Pluck website, and as Kim brought up, there's information in our past webinars. For families and for parents, we need to find opportunities that are out there and help connect them so that they have ways of getting information, not just from the one professional. But what are some local groups that are working on transition? And we have to help parents understand what an impact their support of an exploration activity may be to the success of that activity. That just because they explore an activity doesn't mean that that's where they're now stuck, but that they need multiple opportunities to explore. So we need families need to understand that their support is critical to being willing to try, and we need to make sure that families know their support is so critical. My Transitions has regional groups throughout the state of Montana that actively seeks parent and student participation. As I mentioned earlier, there's the annual Transition Conference. Through My Transitions, again, they're also offering some family transition training, and I've got the dates of those, and there's information and flyers out that you can start to get that information. My Transitions is offering job shadows. Vocational rehabilitation offers job shadows. And when families are looking at a way and a place to start getting that information from transition, I can't stress enough that their local vocational rehabilitation office wants to be a partner, that they want to get this information out, and they want to help families find success. They want that youth to be employed, and they know how critical family involvement is to that success. Lastly is an opportunity to join our mailing list, as we are on a continual basis sending out information that we acquire, information that we think is relevant, and we hope to be sharing successes across our state so people and school teams and families can learn from each other on what's been successful and what's worked. My second to last slide is several resources that I cited within my presentation, and I wanted to make sure you have that information. If you're interested in accessing that YouTube little video, just Google or just put in "When I Grow Up," and you're looking for the kids version, because there are several of them. This one's about 4 minutes long, but to me it's a very powerful piece. So takeaway, it's never too early to start with transition, and it's never too late to start transition process. But we really need to collaborate together, families and professionals, to reach that bright future. Thanks for your time. Kim, I'll pass it to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Theresa. And if you want to advance just to the next slide, I think it's the contact information for the Pre-Employment Transition Services Technical Assistance Center. There we go. Thank you. So we do have time now for some questions if anyone has things that they would like to ask Theresa. We do have a comment. Good job, Theresa. I think the links you have provided will be helpful for working with some of my kiddos.
Thank you kindly.
So we'll see if any questions come in. And meanwhile, while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I'll go ahead and give the sort of wrap-up information. But do feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We do have Theresa for another 9 minutes or so. When we end today's webinar, just a reminder that a short survey will pop up. It's about 8 questions long, and we do ask that you take the time to complete that. We read through all of the responses that we receive, and we use those to try to improve the webinars that we offer in the future, and also to decide what topics we should address at future webinars. And speaking of future webinars, our next pre-employment transition services webinar is what resources are available through Montana workforce agencies, and that will take place on August 11th from 10:30 until 12 o'clock Mountain Time. The flyer and registration information for that will probably go out in the next week and a half or so, so do be watching for that. Again, it's what resources are available through Montana workforce agencies. The recording for today's webinar will be posted on the Vocational Rehabilitation and Blind Services YouTube channel, and I put the shortened URL for that YouTube channel in the chat box earlier today, so if you want to scroll back up through your chat box messages, you should find that URL. And just so that you know what you're looking for, it's http://bit.ly/28, capital X, capital H, small b, capital W, capital U. And I don't usually like to read out URLs, but I know some folks were looking for a YouTube URL, and so we're a bit confused by the bit.ly one. We just wanted to use a shortened website address for that. So let me see if other questions have come in, Theresa. Are there any connections that can be used as mediators between parents and professionals beyond Pluck?
I guess I would say that Pluck can be a resource for that. I guess I'd look at looking at why is a mediator needed. What would you be looking for that within your team? I guess I see value in that team working together. So it may be identifying someone within the team who has that trust relationship that can facilitate participation by the parent. So you're really looking for who has that relationship or is willing to be that person to make that relationship.
Okay, thank you. And we'll see if there are any other questions in here, especially resources for professionals to access. And it looks like those are all the questions that have come in. So Theresa, I would just like to thank you immensely for all of the fantastic information that you shared today and for the resources that you offered to everyone. And I'd like to thank all of the audience members for joining us. As Theresa said, on a July day, it's quite a commitment to come out and spend time at a webinar. So we really appreciate that and honor that. Theresa, do you have any final words or reminders for the audience members?
I don't, and thank you so much for providing all of us an opportunity to get together and talk about families and how important they are in the process. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, have a wonderful rest of your summer, everyone. Thanks so much for participating today.